Who could have imagined that the delicate rhythm of my life might be disrupted by something so insignificant, so ordinary? A simple request. That is the point of origin. My husband casually brought it up during breakfast while he enjoyed his regular black coffee. The same comforting blend. He savored each morning, stripped of any excitement. His words hung in the air, a soft whisper overshadowed by the alluring sound of his spoon tapping against the cup. He asserted that it would guide him toward the correct direction. Claimed he possessed a knack for handiwork, could repair the fence, and maybe even manage the garage door. I yielded effortlessly. There was no strong justification to decline. The young man he referred to had intricately intertwined himself into the very essence of our lives for years. His adoptive grandson, though no longer a child in my perception, at least not in this moment. He had undergone a remarkable transformation. The last time I saw him, he hovered in that alluring realm between adolescence and adulthood. As he stepped over the threshold, that effortless, nonchalant grin gracing his face, he moved with a confidence that spoke of a deep understanding of his own essence. The change captured my focus before I could entirely grasp it. His shoulders had broadened, his jawline sharpened, an irresistible charm in the way he moved that had previously been lacking. The handshake exuded assurance, the eyes steady yet kind, radiating warmth and welcome. And yet there was a subtle undertone, a fluidity that felt almost excessively deliberate. My husband gave him a quick look at the backyard, highlighting the broken latch on the gate and the scattered tools in the garage, discussing the details in that direct way men often use, practical and resolute, concentrating solely on the task at hand. I stood by the kitchen window, watching them, my fingers absent-mindedly tracing the rim of my coffee cup, feeling a strange tension knotting itself deep in my chest. It wasn't a longing. Not at this moment, it was a revelation. That evening, as I moved gracefully through the familiar routine of preparing dinner, I found myself choosing a dress I hadn't worn in ages. Soft and welcoming. Soft material, thin bands, the kind that gently hugs to capture the essence of your shape. I assured myself it was just the warmth that awakened my senses. The summer heat pressed against the windows, the air thick and stifling. Still, I sensed the truth hiding just below the surface. We gathered on the terrace for dinner, with secrets lingering around us. My husband's words floated through the ordinary, crafting stories of work and the far-off journey that awaited him for yet another conference, another round of meetings, his words threading through the well-known fabric of responsibilities and schedules. I paid attention, acknowledged at the appropriate times, but my eyes continually drifted to the man across from me. He reclined with a sense of effortless ease. With one arm casually draped over the back of the chair, a hint of stubble adorned his jaw, suggesting that the morning's rituals had momentarily escaped his attention. Our eyes locked for just an instant. Still, it extended into forever. As the final morsel rested on my plate, my husband quietly departed, shrouded in the darkness of his own motives, leaving behind a silence heavy with unvoiced truths. I stood outside, gathering the plates, pretending not to notice the gentle footsteps that approached as the younger man came closer. He reached out his hand toward the stack of dishes. A delicate tension lingered in the atmosphere. "Let me help you." Our fingers brushed in a fleeting moment, a delicate dance of connection. A gentle touch, nothing deliberate, unseen by the world yet hidden in plain sight. Yet the sensation remained, a warm touch against my skin. Long after the plates had been cleared away, later that night, as I lay in bed next to my husband, attuned to the steady cadence of his breathing, I discovered I was wide awake. My body twisted under the sheets, my mind a tumult of dissatisfaction. I lifted my bare feet, moving quietly down the dim corridor, compelled by the kitchen, murmuring to myself that all I desired was a glass of water. Yet it was not longing that kept me awake in the dark. I paused at the entrance of the guest room, enveloped in a moment heavy with unvoiced mysteries. It was scarcely ajar from the abyss of longing. The gentle whisper of a tune hangs in the atmosphere, drifting away. A seductive, nonchalant tune softly murmured as he moved effortlessly through the darkness inside. The floorboards creaked gently beneath his steps, a whispering noise that hung in the atmosphere. The gentle whisper of cloth caressing the skin. A gentle stream of water starts to trickle down, raindrops tumbling against the refreshing surface. I stood frozen, taking in the mysteries that swirled around me. That seemingly ordinary clandestine relationship, immersing oneself in the soothing caress of water, releasing as the evening deepens, experienced an unforeseen intimacy, unwelcome, as though I were gazing into a hidden truth I was never intended to find. Nevertheless, I stayed motionless. Not at this moment. As I hesitantly made my way back to the sheets, my body pulsed with a silent intensity that hung in the atmosphere. I slipped under the blankets beside my husband, feeling the delightful weight of his arm resting gently on my waist as he stirred in his sleep. His touch was an enticing caress filled with mysteries and silent vows. Steady, oblivious, the comforting cadence of it all. Still, my thoughts hovered just outside that guest room door. I assured myself it was merely a passing notion. I assured myself it was merely a transient experience. I assured myself it was merely a figment of my imagination. Yet an unmistakable transformation had started to take shape. The following morning arrived with a sense of recognition, every instant infused with hidden truths. The atmosphere was heavy with unexpressed longings as sunlight streamed through the partially open blinds, casting alluring shapes on the kitchen floor. I moved through the motions, enveloped in a fog of unexpressed longings. The kettle emits a soft melody, its metallic embrace meeting the fresh, crisp texture of the bread. The gentle hum of the refrigerator filled the air as I reached out for the milk. My husband slipped away as he frequently does, leaving just a brief kiss on my cheek before the front door gently closed behind him. In the midst of monotony, a sense of security enveloped me, yet anticipation lingered. I found myself whispering to quiet the echoes of what had stirred inside me the night before. I persuaded myself that I had moved beyond such trivialities, too clever to let my mind drift aimlessly. Yet my body betrayed me in subtle, insidious ways. Once again, I meticulously chose my attire that morning, taking great care with my appearance. As I swept my hair back and added a hint of allure to my lips, it was clear that this was not for the faint of heart, but rather for the sheer thrill of sensation. Something. I found him outside, focused on his work with the fence sleeves, his muscles taut and flexing as he hammered the weathered nails back into place. He was completely absorbed, immersed in the moment, unaware, or perhaps deliberately pretending not to acknowledge my presence. While I remained on the porch, my eyes were drawn to him. The sweat tracing the curve of his brow glimmered in the morning light, sparkling like fragile shards of glass upon his skin. His body moved with an alluring elegance, each motion intentional and unhurried, as if relishing the atmosphere surrounding him. I made my way into the garden, holding the laundry basket with a grace developed over time. If he happened to see me, he would notice how my dress swayed around my legs, the soft strap playfully sliding down my shoulder. He gave no indication, yet as I reached out to fasten the first piece of fabric to the line, I felt his gaze, purposeful and prolonged. It surrounded me, steadfast and daring, akin to gentle fingers gliding along my spine. I fixed my eyes on the clothes pins, my heart pounding beneath the surface, hesitant to look away just yet. As I shifted my focus to him, his expression concealed a mystery, lips slightly ajar, poised on the edge of unuttered thoughts. The morning enveloped us in a warmth I hadn't expected, as he finally spoke, his voice a sultry whisper, resonant and profound. I gave a slight nod, pretending to focus on my tasks. Certainly is. Could have reached its end at that instant. It should have ended there, but he opted to stay away from the routine. He moved toward me, each step measured and unhurried, across the well-kept lawn, stopping just close enough for me to feel the gentle warmth emanating from him. In the heavy stillness that surrounded us, "You appear changed today," he whispered. I chose to stay quiet. My voice faltered, cloaked in doubt. Instead, I grasped another pin, carefully fastening the next piece of fabric onto the line, my hand steady, despite the wild thumping of my heart beneath my ribs. A moment hung in the air, thick with unvoiced mysteries, as if time itself held its breath. Regrets hung heavily in the atmosphere. His voice, a soft whisper, laced with hesitation. Had I dared to go further, I might have stopped it right then and there. I might have accepted the invitation, offered a charming smile, and persuaded him that nothing had occurred. Nothing at all. Yet here I was, ensnared in the depths of his gaze, lingering far beyond what was intended. "You didn't," I responded. The words tumbled out of my mouth, unrestrained and impulsive, before I could fully comprehend their significance. He closed the gap between us, diminishing until I could make out the subtle shadow of stubble outlining his jawline, the intensity of his gaze as he scrutinized every contour of my face. His hand lingered, trembling with uncertainty, as his fingers glided softly over the delicate curve of my arm, tracing the bare skin of my shoulder. I was utterly entranced by the moment. We remained in that moment, the air thick with the unspoken truths that hovered just out of reach. As the atmosphere crackled with unvoiced mysteries, he leaned closer, closing the distance between us with a purposeful, steady elegance. And the kiss blossomed in a manner that surpassed all my anticipations. It was not a plea for assistance. It was gentle, nearly soft. It was gentle, discovering the soft caress of lips, coming together with warmth, not urgency. His hand lifted to my jaw, his thumb gliding over my cheek as he tilted my face nearer to his. My body froze for a moment, my mind reverberating with warnings. Yet my lips deceived me. In that moment, as our eyes locked in a slow, trembling exchange, the basket fell from my hands, landing softly on the ground, its quiet thud barely breaking through the roar of blood pounding in my ears. The gentle heat of his hand swept across my neck, his fingers playfully exploring the delicate line where my dress hugged my form. I paused my breath, my eyes brimming with unvoiced mysteries. This is not possible. The words felt heavy and awkward as I struggled with them. He just did not engage in discussion. He pulled back a bit, establishing some space. His hands rose in a sign of surrender, yet his gaze stayed fixed on mine, unwavering and intense. "I understand," he murmured, "but that won't stop us from wanting it." I turned my eyes away, concealing the flush that was rising in my cheeks as I stooped to gather the scattered laundry, my fingers shaking with an undeniable tremor. The rest of the day slipped into a dull routine, caring for the plants, shining the surfaces, answering my husband's question about dinner. I kept my calm, my smile steadfast. With every moment I closed my eyes, the ghost of his lips remained on mine. It adhered to me an incessant force. The taste of that morning's kiss lingered within me, an undeniable reality that refused to fade, no matter how hard I attempted to suppress it beneath the burdens of tasks, phone calls, polite conversations, and the ordinary duties that should have filled my mind. However, they decided against it. They merely skimmed the surface of longing. Every part of me quivered with discomfort, my body sharply aware, my mind ensnared in an unending waltz around the same alluring mystery. He donned a mask of indifference, expertly hiding the truth behind a veneer of normalcy. As we moved through the house, our paths crossed in the hallway, a brief brush near the sink. His demeanor stayed calm, enigmatic, and frustratingly composed. In those fleeting instances, I felt his eyes on me, a prolonged look that seemed to pause time before he finally turned away. It carried no regret, no shame, just that persistent, quiet insistence. It ignited a fierce freedom inside me, or maybe revealed an unfiltered reality. The next evening, my husband disclosed his intentions to leave at first light. A new and unforeseen adventure for business, possibly lasting 3 days, or perhaps extending to 4. His voice was heavy with remorse, but his eyes stayed glued to the screen, fingers gliding over the keys with every bite. During dinner, I sported a smile, nodded in understanding, and delivered all the right words. "Be assured it carries importance. I will handle everything here." And I truly meant it, or at least a piece of my essence did. Yet another part lingered in the darkness. Another piece has caught fire. That night, I stood before the bathroom mirror, my fingers tracing the soft curve of my collarbone, entranced by the way my skin flushed beneath my touch. I chose my nightgown with an abundance of longing, a tender caress, a gentle embrace, a feeling that hung in the air like a secret temptation concealed. Through the gaze of the globe, the reflection in the glass looked back at me, shrouded in an enigmatic aura, as though we existed in separate realms. A woman I had long since erased from my memory. Restless thoughts kept me awake, swirling in my mind. My body rested still beneath the sheets. Breaths are slow and deliberate, in harmony with the sound of my husband turning, shifting, and finally yielding to the peaceful rhythm of deep sleep beside me. As the tension reached its peak, I quietly slipped from the bed, my bare feet gliding softly over the hardwood floor. I walked down the hallway and stepped onto the terrace, feeling the cool night air against my warm skin. He lingered in the shadows, leaning against the railing, arms crossed, his silhouette gently illuminated by the moon's soft glow. I contemplated whether he had been waiting with eager expectation, or if the same restless desire had pulled him from his sleep as it had me, as the soft click of the door resonated in the quiet. He turned his gaze, his eyes finding me easily in the shadows, a quiet stillness surrounding us both. I stood in that doorway, gripping the frame as if it could hold me steady against the weight of the moment. His gaze drifted, tracing the lines of my silhouette, the sheer fabric of my nightgown, subtly concealing the shape it enveloped. Shame should have overwhelmed me as I withdrew into those walls, locked the door, buried myself under the sheets, and begged for the morning to come. Instead, I approached closer. The distance that had kept us apart disappeared in a heartbeat. Our bodies drawn together by an invisible power we both felt compelled to acknowledge. His hand brushed against my wrist, a teasing caress that sent a thrill coursing through me. As fragile as a whisper, I stayed near. My hand lifted as if under a spell, tracing the line of his jaw, feeling the roughness of his stubble against my fingers, the heat of his skin pulsing just below the surface. "I should not remain in this place," I whispered gently. His reply exuded a seductive tranquility, every word a captivating enigma. "Indeed, you genuinely are." The depth of his stare, not that of a youthful dreamer, but of a man acutely conscious of his wants, awakened something deep inside me, igniting a tantalizing tension. His hand moved to the small of my back, pulling me closer with a seductive slowness, giving me a moment to push back. I did not. My body melted against his, as though it were fated to be in that very place. My head tilted back, lips parting as his barely brushed against mine. The kiss blossomed, lingering softly, every second stretched with purpose. A question asked not in words, but in the soft brush of lips, intertwining with the tender glide of his hand along the curve of my waist. He kissed me with a longing that seemed to imprint the moment deep within his essence. Each moment hung in the air, enveloped in warmth, and I yielded to him completely. I pressed my lips to his, an unvoiced longing between us, my fingers clutching the fabric of his shirt, pulling him closer. The night wrapped around us like a thick blanket, the air charged with longing, and the alluring scent of jasmine drifting up from the garden beneath. Within the walls of the house, the clock continued its steady ticking, unaware of the storm that was unfolding between us. As I drew back, panting, my hand remained resting on his chest. He stayed motionless, allowing me to dwell in the silence that hung between us. He let me go, but his eyes stayed fixed on me. "I don't regret it," he whispered, a playful glint in his eyes. I chose to stay quiet. I turned away, retreating through the door, shutting it behind me with hands that trembled as if they had lost their rightful place. With the arrival of the next dawn, everything returned to its well-known shape. The kitchen stirred to life again with the enticing rush of water, the captivating clink of dishes, and the gentle, inviting hum of the radio. The suitcase belonging to my husband sat by the front door, a quiet indication of his approaching departure. He pressed his lips softly to my cheek as he left the scene, tender, practiced, and soothing. Still, my body clung to the remnants of that night. Every nerve quivered beneath my skin. every part of me sparked by the recollection of his lips against mine. In that instant, it dawned on me that this was just the beginning. The morning light emerged, hinting at the beginnings of what lay ahead. The world presented its usual facade of normalcy so convincingly that for a brief moment, I almost fell prey to the illusion. The sky unfolded infinitely, a masterpiece of transparency. The sun cast its gentle warmth, while the breeze wove through the open windows, sharing secrets that urged me to yield once again. The appearance of simplicity, the steam rising from the cup, the bread embraced by the fire, the daily rituals unfolding like a carefully orchestrated show. I sat at the kitchen table, my fingers tracing slow circles around the edge of my mug, enveloped in a fog of unexpressed longings. The chair across from me remained empty, the air in the room thick with the remnants of yesterday's whispers. My body held it like a hidden truth, waiting patiently to be revealed. The kiss, the closeness, the soft, deliberate caress of his lips against mine, the desire it sparked inside me. I murmured to myself again that this must come to a close, that I could rein myself in, that I hadn't crossed a threshold of no return. Yet my body betrayed me with every thought of him. The resonance of his touch on my waist, the steadfast assurance in his voice as he proclaimed his absence of regret. I should have experienced rage. I should have felt disgusted by my own behavior. Yet all that remained was the unyielding rhythm of longing resonating gently and deeply, as if my entire existence had come alive to the core of feeling. As the soft murmur of the creak from the back door filled my ears, and the faint sound of footsteps swept across the kitchen floor, I decided to hold my gaze downward for just a moment longer. His presence was unmistakable, a hidden tension in the atmosphere before any words left his mouth. His presence filled the atmosphere, a quiet melody that conveyed deep meanings without a single sound. I'm setting out to collect a few necessities. His voice cut through the silence, smooth and effortless. Is there anything you wish to obtain from the town? I turned my eyes away, captivated by the alluring movement of the coffee's swirling designs. No, I'm completely fine. The deception was so subtle that the air itself quivered under the burden of unvoiced realities. Nevertheless, he opted to avoid facing it. He slipped away as silently as he had arrived, the door whispering shut behind him, gently lingering in the shadows. The weight of his absence loomed large, almost as palpable as his presence, while I devoted the hours that followed to rediscovering my essence. Folding laundry with a meticulous elegance, buffing the already shining countertops, and rearranging the books on the shelf merely to engage my fidgety hands. Still, the electric pulse of anticipation remained, unwilling to dull the sharp edges of unease flowing within me. Every motion felt like a vacant reverberation of existence, a facade in which I had lost my belief. As the sun sank beneath the horizon, the heavy silence that cloaked the house grew increasingly intolerable. I persuaded myself that taking a step back, even for a moment, was crucial to clarify my thoughts and gain a new viewpoint. I grabbed my keys, threw on a light jacket despite the warm day, and headed out for my drive. The core of the town stares straight forward, as mysteries twirl in the dim corners of thought. The streets exuded a feeling of closeness, secrets intricately woven into every corner. The quaint little grocery store that had been my refuge for years. The cozy, softly illuminated cafe at the corner, where couples sat close, sharing warm drinks and the weight of their unvoiced confessions. I wandered through the aisles without purpose, my fingers grazing the shelves as if choosing a box of cereal might anchor me back to reality. Suddenly, he stood before me. As I turned the corner near the produce section, he was there, waiting. At the far end of the aisle, he rested effortlessly against the shopping cart, his eyes fixed on the label, a flicker of curiosity playing in his expression. A craft. He looked up, our gazes met, and for a fleeting moment, time froze around us. It seemed as though destiny had intricately intertwined its strands, every curve and angle meticulously planned. My stomach twisted, my breath held captive in a seductive interplay between my chest and throat. He wore a cunning smile, nonchalant and unbothered, declined. Anticipation lingered in the atmosphere as I gulped, attempting to reflect his casual attitude. The distance between us was enticingly slim, despite the wide aisle that lay ahead. We both stood there in silence, each pretending not to notice the electric tension, buzzing with the unuttered words that hung between us. "Seeking assistance with your burdens?" he asked after a pause, his hand gesturing toward the empty basket beside me. A hint of playful mischief flickered in his eyes. "I'm fine," I replied, my voice lacking the warmth I had intended to express. Still, I stayed. We moved down the next aisle together, side by side, sharing light words that floated around us. The ambience, the expense of lively greens, the absurdity of the parking mayhem beyond. In a brief encounter, our fingers brushed against each other, a spark igniting as we both reached for the same box of tea. Not a single word of regret passed between us. The journey back was quiet, the vehicle wrapped in the gentle hum of the motor and the intense feeling of intimacy. His gaze flickered towards me now and then as I concentrated on the scenery beyond, trying to conceal the frantic beat of my heart thudding against my ribs. Upon reaching the house, he turned off the engine but remained still, pausing before unlocking the door. He turned his attention to me, leaning back slightly in his chair. "I never meant to encounter you," he whispered, his tone thick with an underlying strain. Still, I discover comfort in my decision. As I looked at him, really looked, a revelation emerged before me for the very first time. The same chaotic battle shimmering in his eyes that sparked a flame inside me. The longing, the restraint, the quiet, painful acknowledgement of our deeds. "This is dangerous," I whispered. The words hung in the air, his eyes fixed on me, unwavering. I comprehend. The moment hung in the air, thick with unspoken tension. And then, with a slow elegance, he reached out, his fingers brushing against the soft skin of my wrist, light as a whisper, as if testing my resolve to pull away. I did not. He approached, his eyes searching mine, presenting me with a choice. And once more I allowed him to continue, his lips gently grazing mine, initially tentative, relishing the moment like the first hint of a hidden longing. However, the pause was brief. The kiss hung in the air, a purposeful ballet of longing. His fingers grazed the nape of my neck, pulling me nearer as my body yielded to the gravity of his presence. As we finally parted, breathless, I rested my forehead against his. With my eyes closed, my heart pounded wildly, a thrilling sensation flowing through me. "We truly should hold back," I urged. "Indeed we shall," he whispered. In that moment, we both recognized that he possessed the truth. There was no avoiding the inevitable from that point onward. No more excuses can be tolerated. The walls of pretense have fallen. An undeniable spark has ignited between us, and neither of us has made a real effort to extinguish it. Perhaps it's the recognition that lingers in the background. Their revealed truths only fueled the flames of desire further, stripping away the last remnants of doubt that had kept us in falsehood. My husband left at dawn, a suitcase held firmly in his hand. The familiar sound of the front door closing behind him, reminiscent of a secret being set free. The void he left hung heavy and oppressive, a silence that amplifies hidden truths. Every faint noise, the persistent ticking of the clock on the wall, reverberating with unspoken stories. The soft creak of the floorboards underfoot, the quiet whispers of birds singing from outside the window. Ordinary sounds felt painfully sharp. I stood at the kitchen counter, my fingers wrapped around an untouched coffee cup, lost in the stillness. My eyes followed the delicate curl of steam rising, yearning to lose myself in its warmth, if only to momentarily lighten the weight that pressed upon my heart. But I remained trapped, unable to escape. My body stirred with a fervor it had long forgotten, unsettled, delicate, yearning deep within as the soft rap echoed through the shadows at the rear entrance. I moved without a second thought. I felt it all without a glance. His presence enveloped me long before his form came into view. He entered unbidden, a shadow of intent trailing behind him. Softly closing the door, he welcomed the whispers that hung in the atmosphere. His eyes met mine, exposing the chaos I had tried to hide. I felt the heat rising beneath my skin as he approached. The space that had separated us faded with every purposeful step he took. Silence surrounded us, thick and electric. His hand lifted, fingertips grazing my cheek, threading through my hair, while his gaze remained fixed on me with intensity. His touch was gentle, exuding a sense of unwavering confidence. His thumb caressed my jawline softly, a delicate gesture that blended longing and possession in a graceful interplay. The kiss came suddenly, devoid of the careful, tentative build-up of previous encounters. His lips found mine with a fervent longing that matched my own. His hands slid to my waist, pulling me nearer, as if we had been caught in this embrace for eternity, defying the unavoidable. And perhaps we did, perhaps not in the obvious way, but in each fleeting glance, we averted feigning ignorance of the undeniable tension that lingered between us. I can't recall how it happened, but my hands found their way into his hair, fingers gripping tighter as I leaned closer in the embrace, savoring the blend of desire and hesitation that made it unthinkable to pull away. My heart raced with an intensity that resonated in the stillness, as though he could feel the wild pulse beneath my skin. He gently pressed me against the kitchen counter, one hand steady at the curve of my back, the other resting on my hip, holding me in place as if I might disappear if he loosened his hold. I yielded entirely. My body pressed against his, yearning, quivering with a longing for the heat of his presence, the pressure of his touch, the draw of his lips upon my own. It was tender. It was deliberate. Each caress was intentional, every motion languid enough to ignite a longing swift enough to blaze across my skin. As his lips departed from mine and glided along the curve of my throat, a gasp escaped me, my head arching back reflexively, fingers entwined in his hair. His breath brushed against my skin, his mouth soft yet insistent as he placed kisses along the delicate curve of my neck. I found myself unable to resist. He exhaled softly against me, his voice low and personal. I stayed quiet, unable to respond. My mind quieted while my body started to express a long-suppressed language I had kept hidden for far too long. This was not the first occasion my husband had left me alone in this house. It was not the first time I felt the oppressive silence filling the spaces he vacated. However, this marked the first instance I permitted someone else to explore that emptiness and claim it for themselves. The outside world remained unchanged, shrouded in mysteries and unexpressed longings. The garden swayed gently in the wind, the faint sound of traffic a hidden whisper beyond the hedges, the sky vast and clear above it all. Calm on the outside, yet beneath the surface, a storm brewed, alive and exhilarating as he finally exhaled, breathless and uneven. His hands resting at my waist, his eyes locked onto mine, a quiet vow suspended in the atmosphere. Silence surrounded us, dense and electric, extending into infinity. The air buzzed with the unvoiced choice that hovered in the dim light. "You know this won't be enough," he stated firmly. I nodded gradually, my fingers tracing the rim of the countertop, searching for something solid to ground me in the midst of the swirling doubt. He was undeniably right. A kiss, a brief moment hidden in the dim light of the kitchen, could never quench the hunger. The desire had dug in too deeply. As he began to leave, I found myself captivated by the alluring curve of his figure, the way his shoulders set, as if bracing for the burden of our recent choices. But he opted to walk away. I remained in the quiet long after he had departed, my skin tingling with the echo of his touch, my lips still soft from the mark of his kiss. Regret ought to have overwhelmed me, yet an unquenchable desire emerged instead. The following morning, I awoke with the essence of him still clinging to me, suspended in the space between my lips and the echoes of recollection. A hidden ache lingered with each inhale, as sunlight dripped across the bedroom floor in delicate strokes, weaving familiar shadows against the wall. Yet the atmosphere of the room seemed transformed, as if it now concealed a mystery I couldn't tuck away neatly among creased linens and scattered belongings. The facade had fallen apart, allowing no space for deceit, neither for myself nor for the shadows that remained. The line had been crossed, not by accident, but with conscious awareness and purpose. What frightened me the most wasn't the regret I was supposed to feel, but the yearning that grew stronger within me. Each time I recalled his touch on my skin, the warmth of his breath lingering near my neck, the roughness of his stubble brushing against my jaw as his lips searched for a deeper bond. I moved through the house that morning, my fingers brushing against the furniture as if it were unfamiliar, the kitchen counter where my body had yielded to his embrace. The chair he occupied the night before sat quietly, reminiscent of a tranquil lake, as if we hadn't revealed our innermost thoughts in the soft light of dawn. Every corner of the house throbbed with unvoiced mysteries, even without any tangible evidence. It seemed as though the walls themselves were infused with that passion, now reflecting that energy back at me. I busied myself with trivial tasks, rearranging objects that needed no care, buffing surfaces that shone effortlessly. Each action felt mechanical, a weak attempt to suppress the growing unease coiling within me. Still, no distraction could silence its persistent thrum. Every touch of my hands on my skin, the delicate folding of cloth, the gentle brushing of hair from my face awakened the recollections of where his fingers had once rested. By midday, the house was shrouded in an eerie stillness. The silence was so profound it felt like a pulse against my eardrums. Time dragged on as I moved aimlessly, each footfall reverberating with the remnants of him lurking in the corners of this space. I told myself I yearned for liberation, a brief respite, even if only for an instant. The decision felt innocent as I grabbed my keys, casually tossing a sweater over my shoulders and slipping into my well-worn flats, standing by the door. Yet, as I stepped outside, my heart quickened with the exhilarating promise of an inevitable meeting, that risky waltz of fate that had long abandoned its mask of chance. I wandered aimlessly, initially embraced by the soft hum of the engine breaking the silence. The streets of the town blurred into a comforting haze. Still, my mind wandered to the weight of his gaze, the confidence in his caress, the cadence of his breath, thick with longing. As he approached, I felt the pulse of an unquenchable yearning deep inside, one I struggled to express or satisfy on my own without making a clear decision. I entered the softly illuminated parking lot of the charming convenience store, situated on the town's edge. It was the very place I knew he sometimes hung around, where our paths crossed just often enough for a chance meeting to feel like fate. There I stood, ensnared in the ordinary act of gathering milk and bread, a simple chore that concealed the tumultuous emotions roiling within. My eyes scanned the lot before I even turned off the engine, searching for the outline of his car. It was nowhere to be found, and I should have felt a rush of freedom. Instead, what remained was a heavy sense of disappointment. As I wandered through the narrow corridors, each step felt like a delicate waltz of diversion, my fingers searching for hidden gems while my thoughts wandered far away. I moved into the next aisle, and there he was, an aura that ignited a spark inside me. Not at the register, not outside, but standing before the cooler. One hand pressed against the chilled metal door, the other casually tucked into his back pocket. His head turned at the sound of my footsteps, eyes locking onto mine, with the effortless anticipation of someone who had been waiting. For a brief moment, we were suspended, ensnared in a web of unvoiced tension. I reached for the carton of milk nearest to me, my fingers unnaturally steady, despite the frantic beat of my heart. His gaze followed the movement, slow and deliberate. "Are you following me now?" His voice danced through the air, teasing and welcoming. I gave a quick shake of my head, the corners of my lips lifting slightly before I could suppress them. Not by choice. The space between us was heavy with unspoken words, the coolness from the fridge wrapping around us like a shroud. I shifted slightly, pretending to examine the drink labels, but his gaze remained, pressing against me like a weight. "You're not wearing your ring," he said, his voice soft and low. I paused for a brief moment, my eyes wandering to my hand, bare and unembellished, just as it had been that morning when I had thoughtlessly placed it down, gently setting it into the dish beside the sink, where it frequently lay at night. I stayed quiet. The silence between us thickened, heavy with unvoiced truths that hung in the air, unwilling to dissipate, compelling. He glided with a mix of grace and purpose, closing the distance until the faint trace of his cologne intertwined with the fresh scent of soap, both alluring and charged. My body tensed, my breath caught in my throat. Should I end this dance? His question hung in the air, soft yet resolute. I could have spoken, could have said what was necessary, but instead, my lips parted and silence remained. Instead, I felt the gentle caress of his hand moving smoothly across the small of my back, fingers ascending until they reached the contour of my shoulder. His thumb traced intentionally along the line of my sweater. His eyes were locked onto mine, waiting for any sign of hesitation. There was no secret lurking beneath the surface. As I finally released my breath, it trembled, faltering, my body leaning ever so slightly into his caress, drawn in like a moth to a flickering flame. We held back from kissing, wary of the daylight and the prying eyes that could catch us. Yet the air crackled with an unspoken promise, pulling us closer in a wordless pact that lingered just beyond our lips. The journey back felt like it would stretch on forever. Every stoplight, every curve in the road, a lingering reminder of paths not taken, or perhaps those I had accepted long before I found the courage to face reality. I drifted through the shadowy corners, a restless soul ensnared in a tangle of unvoiced longings, searching for peace. My body ached for the heat of his embrace, the power of his grip, the softness of his lips against mine. Yet, deeper than that, I yearned for the fervor of his eyes fixed on me. It felt as though I was trapped in the dimness of habit and compromise. When the message finally came, short and clear, "Are you alone?" I responded instantly, the single word that felt genuine and true. Indeed, a thrill surged within me long before his hand touched the door. The knock was a gentle touch, a murmur of expectation, as if the weight of what awaited could be eased by its soft arrival. Yet it was not. My hands trembled against the smooth surface as I clutched the handle, fingers holding it tightly, compelling myself to breathe evenly. I sensed the presence right away. The moment my phone vibrated, I felt it resonate within me. Resting on the kitchen counter, the single phrase glimmered in the soft light, calling to me. I was too ensnared to resist. As I flung the door open, he stood in the doorway, one hand tucked away in his jeans pocket, the other resting against the frame, leaning in slightly, his eyes steady and unyielding. The facade had fallen apart, allowing no space for deceit, neither for myself nor for the shadows that remained. The line had been crossed, not by accident, but with conscious awareness and purpose. What frightened me the most wasn't the regret I was supposed to feel, but the yearning that grew stronger within me. Each time I recalled his touch on my skin, the warmth of his breath lingering near my neck, the roughness of his stubble brushing against my jaw as his lips searched for a deeper bond. I moved through the house that morning, my fingers brushing against the furniture as if it were unfamiliar, the kitchen counter where my body had yielded to his embrace. The chair he occupied the night before sat quietly, reminiscent of a tranquil lake, as if we hadn't revealed our innermost thoughts in the soft light of dawn. Every corner of the house throbbed with unvoiced mysteries, even without any tangible evidence. It seemed as though the walls themselves were infused with that passion, now reflecting that energy back at me. I busied myself with trivial tasks, rearranging objects that needed no care, buffing surfaces that shone effortlessly. Each action felt mechanical, a weak attempt to suppress the growing unease coiling within me. Still, no distraction could silence its persistent thrum. Every touch of my hands on my skin, the delicate folding of cloth, the gentle brushing of hair from my face awakened the recollections of where his fingers had once rested. By midday, the house was shrouded in an eerie stillness. The silence was so profound it felt like a pulse against my eardrums. Time dragged on as I moved aimlessly, each footfall reverberating with the remnants of him lurking in the corners of this space. I told myself I yearned for liberation, a brief respite, even if only for an instant. The decision felt innocent as I grabbed my keys, casually tossing a sweater over my shoulders and slipping into my well-worn flats, standing by the door. Yet, as I stepped outside, my heart quickened with the exhilarating promise of an inevitable meeting, that risky waltz of fate that had long abandoned its mask of chance. I wandered aimlessly, initially embraced by the soft hum of the engine breaking the silence. The streets of the town blurred into a comforting haze. Still, my mind wandered to the weight of his gaze, the confidence in his caress, the cadence of his breath, thick with longing. As he approached, I felt the pulse of an unquenchable yearning deep inside, one I struggled to express or satisfy on my own without making a clear decision. I entered the softly illuminated parking lot of the charming convenience store, situated on the town's edge. It was the very place I knew he sometimes hung around, where our paths crossed just often enough for a chance meeting to feel like fate. There I stood, ensnared in the ordinary act of gathering milk and bread, a simple chore that concealed the tumultuous emotions roiling within. My eyes scanned the lot before I even turned off the engine, searching for the outline of his car. It was nowhere to be found, and I should have felt a rush of freedom. Instead, what remained was a heavy sense of disappointment. As I wandered through the narrow corridors, each step felt like a delicate waltz of diversion, my fingers searching for hidden gems while my thoughts wandered far away. I moved into the next aisle, and there he was, an aura that ignited a spark inside me. Not at the register, not outside, but standing before the cooler. One hand pressed against the chilled metal door, the other casually tucked into his back pocket. His head turned at the sound of my footsteps, eyes locking onto mine, with the effortless anticipation of someone who had been waiting. For a brief moment, we were suspended, ensnared in a web of unvoiced tension. I reached for the carton of milk nearest to me, my fingers unnaturally steady, despite the frantic beat of my heart. His gaze followed the movement, slow and deliberate. "Are you following me now?" His voice danced through the air, teasing and welcoming. I gave a quick shake of my head, the corners of my lips lifting slightly before I could suppress them. Not by choice. The space between us was heavy with unspoken words, the coolness from the fridge wrapping around us like a shroud. I shifted slightly, pretending to examine the drink labels, but his gaze remained, pressing against me like a weight. "You're not wearing your ring," he said, his voice soft and low. I paused for a brief moment, my eyes wandering to my hand, bare and unembellished, just as it had been that morning when I had thoughtlessly placed it down, gently setting it into the dish beside the sink, where it frequently lay at night. I stayed quiet. The silence between us thickened, heavy with unvoiced truths that hung in the air, unwilling to dissipate, compelling. He glided with a mix of grace and purpose, closing the distance until the faint trace of his cologne intertwined with the fresh scent of soap, both alluring and charged. My body tensed, my breath caught in my throat. Should I end this dance? His question hung in the air, soft yet resolute. I could have spoken, could have said what was necessary, but instead, my lips parted and silence remained. Instead, I felt the gentle caress of his hand moving smoothly across the small of my back, fingers ascending until they reached the contour of my shoulder. His thumb traced intentionally along the line of my sweater. His eyes were locked onto mine, waiting for any sign of hesitation. There was no secret lurking beneath the surface. As I finally released my breath, it trembled, faltering, my body leaning ever so slightly into his caress, drawn in like a moth to a flickering flame. We held back from kissing, wary of the daylight and the prying eyes that could catch us. Yet the air crackled with an unspoken promise, pulling us closer in a wordless pact that lingered just beyond our lips. The journey back felt like it would stretch on forever. Every stoplight, every curve in the road, a lingering reminder of paths not taken, or perhaps those I had accepted long before I found the courage to face reality. I drifted through the shadowy corners, a restless soul ensnared in a tangle of unvoiced longings, searching for peace. My body ached for the heat of his embrace, the power of his grip, the softness of his lips against mine. Yet, deeper than that, I yearned for the fervor of his eyes fixed on me. It felt as though I was trapped in the dimness of habit and compromise. When the message finally came, short and clear, "Are you alone?" I responded instantly, the single word that felt genuine and true. "Indeed, A thrill surged within me long before his hand touched the door. The knock was a gentle touch, a murmur of expectation, as if the weight of what awaited could be eased by its soft arrival. Yet it was not. My hands trembled against the smooth surface as I clutched the handle, fingers holding it tightly, compelling myself to breathe evenly. I sensed the presence right away. The moment my phone vibrated, I felt it resonate within me. Resting on the kitchen counter, the single phrase glimmered in the soft light, calling to me. I was too ensnared to resist. As I flung the door open, he stood in the doorway, one hand tucked away in his jeans pocket, the other resting against the frame, leaning in slightly, his eyes steady and unyielding. Yet concealed beneath the surface, a persistent force pulled at the fragile threads of that meticulously crafted tapestry. As it unfolded, a palpable tension enveloped the atmosphere. The house resonated with a void, a familiar quietude that had perpetually followed in the wake of his absence. Yet I had changed. Or perhaps I had at last revealed a truth I had hidden for far too long. I started to uncover the core of my identity, the manner in which I chose my clothing each day, how my fingers glided over the silk of certain blouses, the intricate lace of neglected undergarments. Not for my husband, nor for the man I should have never approached, but for the reflection of myself I thought was gone. A woman longing to embrace her allure, to truly feel vibrant and alive. As I caught sight of my reflection in the hallway mirror, I paused longer than I ever had before. I let my eyes rest on the fine lines that time had carved into my face, the alluring curve of my lips, the bare skin of my shoulders. I stayed there longer than I should have, toying with the neckline of my dress, enchanted by the way the fabric hugged the shapes beneath. The days wove together, each a tantalizing mystery yearning to be revealed, laden with mundane tasks and the heavy, unyielding pulse of expectation. Every sound from outside the window quickening my heartbeat. Each creak of the floorboards stirs something profound inside me. I found myself questioning whether he would come back again. A soft tap resonated at the back door before I had a chance to ask. A sudden sense of recognition enveloped me. I revealed it with great excitement. He remained there stiff and vulnerable, discarding the facade of indifference, uncovering the unvarnished reality underneath. His hands were tucked into his pockets, his gaze steady, cutting through the atmosphere. "I truly shouldn't be here," he whispered again. I may have repeated the same words, voiced the same warnings. We both recognized the emptiness, yet I stayed unaware. Instead, I hung back in the shadows. He moved past me, each step measured, as if assessing my determination, waiting for a moment when I might choose to close the door and stop this escalating tension before it became something we couldn't control. Yet the door stayed ajar. I followed him into the kitchen, where the air felt heavy with tension surrounding us like a close embrace. I leaned against the counter, my arms resting casually in front of me, watching him as he hesitated, unsure of how close he could come. Time stretched out, tangled in a web of doubt about my decision. He lingered in silence, his gaze searching my features for a truth that remained just out of reach. A hint, a request for permission, a silent invitation. I presented him with nothingness, just the delicate curve of my figure, parting my lips slightly, letting breath flow in a slow cadence, while my eyes stayed locked on his. It was more than enough. He closed the distance that separated us, his hand rising, fingers grazing softly against my cheek before weaving into my hair, holding it just firmly enough to draw my face closer to his. The kiss struck with urgency, his lips colliding with mine, carrying the weight of every moment spent in anticipation. The warmth lingered on his lips, a palpable desire clear in the way he leaned into me, pinning me between the unyielding counter and the solid shape of his form. I yielded completely, my hands moving to his shoulders, fingers weaving into the fabric of his shirt, pulling him closer, yearning for something more profound. This moment was filled with urgency, devoid of gentle caresses or hesitant gestures, only the raw desire of two souls conscious of the forbidden, yet yielding to the allure. His lips traced a path down my neck, a playful nibble grazing the delicate skin beneath my ear, drawing a gasp as my body instinctively leaned into him. His hands glided along the curve of my back, slipping beneath the edge of my blouse, a warm and constant presence against my skin. We moved from the kitchen to the living room in silence, our bodies entwined, hands exploring freely, lips hovering close, barely parting for a fleeting breath. The couch captured us once more, my spine sinking into the soft embrace of the cushions, his presence surrounding me, grounding me in the moment, instantly shedding the remnants of my doubt. Yet he paused, pulling back just enough to look down at me, his breath warm and his intense gaze searching. "We won't restrain ourselves, will we?" His voice was a deep rumble, heavy with the tension of restraint and desire. I stayed quiet. I raised my hand, allowing my fingertips to trace his jaw, pulling him nearer, my lips yearning for his once again. The truth hung in the air, unvoiced and weighty, as we moved beyond the veil of pretense. The night surrounded us, his hands exploring every curve, and I silenced my inner conflict of right and wrong, for I realized that this moment was meant to happen. By the time my husband came back, the house had already perfected the skill of hiding my reality. The walls held the silence, hiding the chaos that brewed inside, as if unaware of the careful disintegration of the life I had so diligently built. The kitchen shone, the bed was flawlessly made, and the laundry sat neatly folded, stashed in drawers like hidden truths yearning to be revealed. My hands moved through the tasks with an unsettling precision. My body moved through the familiar dance of a woman whose life seemed whole, yet inside, turmoil ruled. Certain betrayals linger quietly, absent the noise of slamming doors. There are no raised voices or the chaos of things thrown in anger. Some betrayals reveal themselves with a gentleness that lets them infiltrate unnoticed, like a whisper in the night, until the moment comes when you realize the ground beneath you is giving way. I anticipated feeling the weight of shame, the choking regret that is supposed to follows you like a shadow. Yet I discovered that regret doesn't always make its presence known with noise. Sometimes it wears the guise of longing. Sometimes it lingers like a forbidden kiss that should have never happened. He kept a measured distance for 2 days after that pivotal night. I didn't see him. I didn't hear the knock at the back door. Yet his presence hung in the air, drawing my gaze out the kitchen window longer than necessary, waiting for a fleeting silhouette. My skin still tingled where his hands had once gripped me, fingers tracing sensations that would not fade. As my husband entered, suitcase in hand, his smile was that familiar gentle curve I had seen many times before. Intimate, warm, and reassuring. He pressed his lips to my cheek, leaving a lingering warmth that felt devoid of desire, and asked about the house, the garden, and the subtle details that had always filled the space between us. I replied as I always did, my voice calm, my smile polite. Yet a part of me remained outside myself, watching the scene unfold, noting the woman who once firmly maintained her limits, now yielding as if she hadn't already turned those limits to mere ashes. During dinner, I leaned closer as he recounted stories from the conference, sharing tales of colleagues, of deals that thrived in the light and those that slipped into darkness. His words floated in the air between bites of roasted chicken and sips of wine, the same wine he always selected, dry, reliable, and intimately familiar. Just like him, I wore a smile when it was expected, laughed at the right moments, and let my fingers brush against his hand on the table. The gesture smooth, practiced, and effortless. Yet in my thoughts, I wandered to stronger holds, to lips that pressed with purpose. That night, as we melded in the quiet of our shared haven, his touch was gentle, lingering just as it had always been. Yet my body stayed unyielding to his invitation. I lay beneath him, eyes closed, hands softly resting at his sides, my mind wandering far beyond my flesh, longing for a spark that never came. I perfected the craft of illusion, creating flawless notes, shaping my essence, ensuring the performance ended without a hitch. Yet underneath it all, I felt empty, or maybe tormented by the remnants of someone else's caress. As the instant slipped away, his lips grazed my shoulder. A gentle whisper slipped from his mouth, expressing his yearning for my company. I squeezed my eyes closed, stifling the yearning that welled up inside me. I wondered if he could feel the emptiness beneath my skin, where desire had once flourished. The next morning, I moved through the well-worn routine again. Morning rituals, the sound of dishes clanging, the relentless chores I vowed to tackle. I watched him leave for work, his briefcase swaying lightly at his side, his stance assured, shoulders held high with confidence. As the door clicked shut, a profound silence wrapped around me, my breath catching in a moment of suspense. Uncertainty hung in the atmosphere, a thrilling anticipation that eluded my grasp. Perhaps I had been yearning for the message, or maybe an unseen part of me had conjured it long before the words appeared on my screen. "Are you available?" The truth hovered just beyond my reach, taunting me with its existence before I could even start to examine my own thoughts. Approach. The knock at the back door resonated with a pressing urgency that took me by surprise, as if he had hovered just out of reach, sensing the space I had intentionally left ajar. For him, the door within me that I had left slightly open when I permitted him to enter. Silence wrapped around us, dense and suffocating. Only the relentless pull of souls that had intertwined long before consent was ever sought. His hands found me effortlessly, as if they were guided by an unspoken familiarity with my form. My body responded to him before my thoughts could take control. Yet this time an undeniable shift lingered in the air. This time, as he cradled my face in his hands, his lips met mine with an intensity that lingered devoid of haste, without the frantic disarray of garments, and absent the urgency of grasping fingers. There was a simmering. Anticipation hung thick in the air. A concealed longing lurked beneath the surface, deepening the shadows and hinting at a profound secret. An electric tension crackled as his fingers grazed my jaw, lingering just long enough to leave an imprint, as if he were carving the moment into his memory. The warmth of his lips grazed my throat, his body wrapping around mine with a slow, deliberate intensity as if time had momentarily halted. And I detested it. Wanting him was one thing, but longing for him was a completely different story. Yet this touch, this captivating charm, felt like the beginning of something neither of us could truly hold on to when it was over, when we lay intertwined in the soft remnants of it. His hand lingered softly on my hip, his thumb tracing languid, careless circles on my skin. "We can't continue this charade," I finally murmured, my voice scarcely rising above a whisper. He remained silent, speaking in shadows, weaving tales without commitment or justification. He merely nodded, his eyes shut, forehead gently pressed against my shoulder. Yet we remained still, neither of us daring to rise. In that moment of stillness, I understood the hidden realities. What tormented me the most, it wasn't the regret,